next up, how many of you have heard of the company Clio? Oh, Ernie. That's amazing.
And that money we're spending is working.
Yeah. Awesome. So really excited to have Ernie Ben. He's the Director of Design at Clio. And he'll be sharing his experiences and learnings around cross-functional design collaboration. Let's have a big round of applause for Ernie.
Thanks, folks. Well, shit. I hope you're not looking to me for answers. You've got opinions. So I'm here to share just some of what we do at Clio. And I'll talk about a few things. So product at Clio. We're a pretty large company these days. 92-ish developers. It changes every hour, I think. 14 product designers, including myself and Delon, and 11 product managers, and growing. Our VP of product is starting on Monday. So we're a relatively large organization, and we expect to hit, we're at high 300s today, and we're going to hit 500 employees by the end of the year if we can hit our hiring targets. But to look at design in particular at Clio, we're 10 product designers, 2 leads, which are managers and owners of an area, 4 graphic designers that work in our marketing team, and a user research lead in Delon there. My job is to oversee all of design, so marketing design and product design. So I report to the CEO, which is a privilege. That is a part of how we're able to really recognize and extend the value of design at the company. For the fact that every single week I have a one-on-one with Jack, and we talk about what design is doing to further the goals of the company. Next week when our VP of product starts, part of me will report to him, while part of me will continue to report to the CEO. But to me, it's a really critical part when you think about how to build design culture at your company. They have to care at the very root of the company. And if your CEO doesn't give a shit about design and is only hiring designers because he's told that's what they need to do, he or she is told that's what they need to do, that's something that requires a mindset change. And so it's something that we still work at. Even though Jack is my boss, we still strive to educate the rest of the organization about what design is, which we often talk about. It's not just pretty things, but very functional and valuable things that drive the business. So I'm going to share some rituals with you all. And like I said, I don't think I have answers, but I've certainly got opinions. But we'll talk about some of the things that we find really valuable at Clio that help us be better. So one thing we do is we have a launch plan for every employee that starts. And a launch plan is a multi-page document, often probably getting into the 6-page range that an employee has the day they start. It's in their Google Docs folder, and it's one of the first documents that we get them to start consuming. That provides the lay of the land about what life at Clio looks like, what's expected of their job, kind of sometimes where the bathrooms are, Slack channels they need to be a part of, all that good stuff. But one really important thing we do in the Slack channel, in the launch plan, is have a one-on-one list that usually covers about 4 weeks, and it kind of lists out a variety of people that you should schedule one-on-ones with in each week of your first month at Clio. So in your first week, it's going to be people most immediate to you. So for a designer, it would be your product manager. It would be directly related individuals, like anyone that's on Irina's team. She's one of our leads. Would obviously have a one-on-one with her, and other designers within that group. So Irina leads what we call the Manage My Business group. We make legal software, if you don't know, and some of those things are dealing with accounting, invoicing, receiving payments digitally and all that. So she runs that whole squad, and so they need to meet each other and learn about each other and figure out how to work together. But our one-on-one list also gets into things like customer success, customer support. All designers meet support managers, they meet success managers, which are, if you don't know in a product organization, the people that actually work with new customers that get them successfully onboarded onto the product. We meet with salespeople to learn how they sell. But that first month is just really immersed in how you move across the entire company and learn about the functions that exist. And there are names attached to it, which is go schedule a meeting with this specific person. They will know what the meeting is about, and you guys can sit for half an hour or an hour and just work through those details. Super important to us that we not only understand the other parts of the business, but that we are introducing ourselves and starting to open some of those connections so that they know if there's an issue in product, if there's a design problem that they see, that there's a group of people whose names they know and whose faces they know, and they can reach out to you and actually engage with you. That's the key thing about the launch plan. Another thing we do that has been happening lately is product managers have been doing this. I've been a little hesitant about signing my designers up for this, but our product managers, including our new VP of product, spends his first month training and support and answering support calls. And it is an incredibly expensive thing to do, to take a VP and to tell them to answer phone calls about why shit is broken. But that's a huge way for them to actually learn what the pain of our customers look like, and also to build a tremendous amount of empathy in the rest of the organization. So they're going to understand every time we fuck up in product and we ship something that doesn't meet the needs of our customers, they're going to know what that feels like. They're going to remember that time in week 4 that they took angry phone calls. And that's a really important thing to, again, build empathy across the company and make sure that we are very aware about like how well we need to do QA, how well we need to actually understand the use cases of our customers. So yeah, will designers do it? Probably when I'm a little less short-staffed. We have, I showed a big list of designers. We have 7 open heads in product design, including leads in Dublin and in Calgary. So we're growing and hiring. So that was at the company level. Those are just 2 of the rituals that we use. But at the product level, I want to talk about some of the things that are really important to us there. The first one is what we call the triad, and this is my 3-headed dragon from Game of Thrones, because I still like that show, even though it's been a long time since I've seen a new episode. I'm hanging in there, it's going to be okay. So one real important thing we do at Clio is we have triads, and the triads are a leadership team of 3, and they represent product management, design, and engineering. And this happens at the leadership level, where actually my brother, one of the directors of product management, John Watson, our VP of engineering, and myself are considered the leadership triad that meets with Jack, our CEO, every single week. And we discuss the state of the world for product, strategic initiatives that we need to undertake, but we are partners. Even for the fact that John is a VP, we are, to a degree, peers in the way that we lead our organizations. We are also, we communicate daily, like more than daily. We communicate every 2-3 hours, and we're always keeping each other abreast of like what's happening with our teams. We look at product as a single organization with 3 disciplines, and that means that I actually mentor development managers. I do some mentoring with product managers as well. We actually have a really cross-disciplinary kind of view of the world where all of us need to rely on each other to make great choices. No one essentially is the boss. And so that triad exists at the product leadership level, but it also exists down at a squad level. So our squad's obviously a team of developers, roughly 6, give or take. You know, 2 pizzas, maybe depending on the size of the pizza, who knows. But even a intermediate level designer is considered to be a leader in their triad. And then with their dev manager and their product managers, collectively make decisions about what problems they're going to solve and how they're going to solve them. Each one has a different focus. Product managers own the problem space, dev managers own the quality of the solution that's built, and designers own the actual solution itself. There's pretty clear roles about which each one owns. But in our world, something that's been a surprise to some new hires we have, design has the ability to block a release. So the first time I did this, the PM was like, what the fuck? Did Ernie just stop my release from going out? And I was like, fuck yeah, I did, because that's not good enough. And it was a shock. Like, and PMs are just like, well, you're design. And I'm like, yeah. And I represent the quality of the product that goes out to our customers and how it impacts our brand. So the fact that we are organized in such a manner means that our designers are very hard to hire because they need to be incredibly willing to mix it up and get in there and fight for what we need. But they're also given a lot of power. They're given a tremendous amount of power to say, like, this is just not good enough, we are not shipping it. And there's no questions there. If a designer calls that something can't go out, there's no real discussion about whether or not the designer should be able to do that. That's just done. So that's our triad. What was this one about? This was my Illuminati thing. Still the triad? Fuck, I forgot that I had more images, but whatever. All right, so that was product level. Then we got design. Down at the design level, 2 rituals that are really important to us. The first one, the weekly sync. Get it? Yeah, I didn't have a better picture. Come on, how are you going to represent a weekly meeting? Because I don't want a picture of a bunch of designers. That's boring. Anyway, like I mentioned, we've got 12 designers and a couple others, and we all work on slightly different areas of the product. A lot of autonomy for each squad, but the weekly sync is where we get together, and it's 1 hour, and we do 2 very specific things. I communicate down from my meetings with product leadership, so stuff that I'm talking to the CEO, VP of Engineering, and Director of PM about, all the things about how we're operating, that's my opportunity to communicate that to the team. So that's really about strategic direction. Hey, these are changes that are happening that you should be aware of, so that you can align your thinking, you can align the actions that you take. But the next thing that's more important is we break up the 45 minutes into presentations by 3 designers. And every designer they have a bit of a template so we can keep things really consistent, but their template really focuses on what the problem space that you're working on is, what some of the context around it is, and then what is the solution if you have one that you're talking about. We don't focus too much on the solution, because the point of that sync and that presentation is really about creating visibility across the product team. Because we are working on so many different pieces, and maybe I'll take one step back. I talked about the triad for the squads. That is actually the #1 relationship that our designers are told to prioritize. If there's ever a meeting that needs to happen for a squad's triad or team, that takes precedence over any meetings with the rest of the product designers. We actually feel that the autonomy of that team to ship value to customers is more important than hanging out with other designers and high-fiving. Because that's generally what happens. Our designers love to high-five. And so, if we... Are we going to do this? So, the weekly sync is really about what is going on in your world that you want others to be aware of, so that they can connect with you afterward. So we don't make this a critique. It's not like, hey, I'm going to start showing my thing, and everyone starts saying, hey, did you consider making it purple? Right? So it'll be like, hey, shut up. Talk about that later. I want to talk about the problem and what we're doing. And what we want to do is we want to expose that so that people can say, hey, I actually dealt with something similar. Let's connect after, and I'll share all my learnings. Or I know you're going to get screwed if you try to ship that, and here's reasons why. But we ask people to take it offline. Like you can raise your hand and say, hey, we should connect. But that helps people understand like what the landscape looks like. But you literally cannot get through enough presentations if everyone just starts asking questions. You'll get locked on a single one where everyone will ask you dumb questions about, have you tried X? You'll say, yes, I'm not a terrible designer. I tried it. And here's why in this context there were issues. But we love each other, and it's all cool. But the key thing is, how do we provide that transparency? And we got focused onto that 15-minute presentation that follows a framework, so we can really kind of power through it and make sure that the core concepts are communicated. Last thing, craft. Get it? Okay, so we do a bi-weekly craft meeting. So it's design craft, and we focus on skills as a designer. And so the key thing for us here is this ritual means leave all your project baggage at the door. We don't want to hear about stuff you've been doing, but we may want to hear about the new processes that you're trying, or what are tools, what are learnings, what did you learn at that conference we sent you to, and bring it back and tell us everything you learned in a way that is relevant to our organization. So don't just recite, don't do a book report. We also do book reports, which is super nerdy, but I got tired of buying shit tons of books from Amazon and asking if anyone had read them.
Is that just your designers, or is that a company-wide?
It's just the designers, though people are invited to come if they want. Like we have a couple devs who say like, hey, can we come to craft? And we're like, sure, as long as you're not too many. We're not too private about it, but it's just like, with the size of the room, because when we do craft, it's actually all the designers in the company, which is 17, including marketing. I don't know what we're going to do when we hire our Dublin lead, because those hours just don't overlap. I used to have a dev team in Paris, and that meant like I was working from 11 p.m. till midnight, and then from like 6 to 7 just to connect and cover stuff. So we haven't figured it out in terms of what happens when you suddenly have resources in completely different time zones. But for now, because We only have one remote designer right now who's in LA. We're able to maintain kind of the quality of this particular meeting. But like I said, this one is wholly focused on our craft, our skills. And again, it could be tools, it could be process, it could be someone walking through how to effectively produce things. Like, I don't know, maybe it's a journal app, or it could be any number of tools or artifacts. But we ask people to actually put the time and energy into producing a high quality presentation. We are scheduled, there's like, you can choose from a list of kind of formats. You can do a lightning talk, you can do a keynote, you can do a workshop. But we try to provide enough structure that people don't get lost in thinking about like, what am I going to do for craft? So we try to provide some boundaries and say, hey, if you want to do a lightning talk, a little less prep, here are some guidelines. And we have a team that puts quite a lot of energy in helping people produce. Maybe the last part of that, craft is really important to us because it also often involves presentation. And many of you know that the quality of presentations that a designer can give are really critical to their ability to sell an idea. So this is also a chance for us to give critique on presenters. We also have had other groups, one of which Irina started, that was about similar to Toastmasters but less dorky, around like how to give great presentations that have a great story that manages to hit the points. But these are all the things that we try to work on in craft. And that's it. Who's got questions? Maybe?
I'm really fascinated with the pulling the ripcord on the release. What is your release, without giving too much detail, look like that, and where is there that sort of ripcord for each group to build pull?
So lawyers don't like change. I don't know if you would assume that. A lot of our customers are very change adverse, and if any of you work in product, you'll probably find that like change management can be really difficult. So we already start with, we tend to ship things to beta groups, like small groups, and we kind of iterate through that. But what we find is that it's really easy for product teams to get caught up in dates. You know, we'll set a target date, and then people get really attached to that date and think like, hey, we've got to ship hell or high water, or else we're going to be seen as failures. And we had an instance where we tried to launch a new calendar feature. It went out, and very quickly through a Slack group that we have with our customers, we started hearing some pretty rough feedback from people commenting on the issues they were having. So, and now I'm telling a really long story to answer your question. But what happened afterward is I saw enough customer feedback that I proposed that we roll it back. The team felt surprised that we could even roll it back, but we did. And then when I talked to the team about what happened, my designer actually said, yeah, I was concerned about that release. I was seeing issues, but I didn't know that I didn't know what to do about it. And so that's really where kind of the evolution of that report came, where we just said, look, you know, dates are going to happen because, you know, we're aligning things like the marketing team is like setting up for like pushing PRs or press releases and any number of things to publicize like the changes. And even the support organization is often like gearing up for these changes to kind of handle customers. So it really was just a reflection on the fact that like, hey, it's really easy to get caught up when you've got this machine in motion, and making sure we spent the time to give people permission to say like, it is way worse to ship a bad release than it is to miss a date. And part of it was just evolving our culture that, you know, if we put our customers first and we think about their success first, then the decision becomes really easy. That, you know, if you have to make a decision about did we do the right thing for the customer or did we like hit the deadline, then once you start talking about it out loud and you kind of give everyone permission, like people just start bringing it up. And that still doesn't mean that everyone knows exactly to pull the ripcord. I've actually told all the designers that, you know, you may not be the one that eventually stands up and says like, I'm stopping the release, but at a minimum you need to tell me so that I can come in and ask those questions, and if I need to do it, I will. But to the designers, it's like you have the power, and if you're nervous about it, just get me or get one of the other directors and we'll come in and assess that.
I like a lot of the stuff you're saying about quality. I'm curious what you all do to sort of affect that upstream. And what I mean by that is like, what do designers do to ensure that the quality of what they're outputting to developers is in such a way that they're able to execute those concepts really well? And just generally curious about what you've learned about, you know, when you put something through that process and it doesn't go so well, what have you done to improve that communication cycle?
Okay. So quality. Quality is hard. Quality is hard. Who would have thought? So one thing we do is the designers almost always sit next to their PMs, but also sit really in the same pod as their developers. So that step one is building access, which is like anytime a developer has a question, they're going to be able to talk to the designer. So step one is building that relationship and making sure that that's really tight, so communication is happening. The other thing, which is something that we're still working hard on, is that cultural shift and how to build empathy amongst developers. We know that we cannot solve or specify for every problem. So one thing we're really pushing hard on is getting developers to ask different questions of the designers, is to talk about what the motivations for the customer are. And that's actually one of the #1 things, or like one of the biggest reasons our designers are embedded is, and the job we talk about is like, your job is to essentially be a core source of knowledge and empathy for your dev team so that they understand why your customer needs the thing that they're building. That we actually really don't want devs asking us, how should this behave when this event happens? Really what we want them to say, why does this matter, what's more important? And so that they can start to make choices where we say, hey, accuracy is actually the #1 thing that's going to either like ruin the customer's experience here, or maybe it's speed. Maybe we'll talk about the fact that like, hey, the customer's going to be scanning this and looking at this like 20 times an hour, and what they need are like very fast responses that are accurate, or whatever that might be. But really what we're trying to do, and we're very much in process, because it's not easy, to get developers to just like ask the right question and to care about why they're building the thing. That's not true of everyone. I've worked with some amazing developers where like they, when they are building it, understand pretty close to as much as I do about why we're doing it and how we thought about the whole process through really collaborative design. Like I had front-end devs who I spent every single day looking at the designs and talking about the rationale for every piece, so that when I went into build, I spent maybe 30 minutes a day looking at what they were doing. But they could execute it so well, because they knew exactly why we were building it. Does that help answer the quality question?
Yeah, I was actually a little bit more maybe looking for a practical answer around like the output, like the actual artifact that gets handed over. Just like over the course of the last 5-10 years I've been working, I've kind of realized designers tend to just kind of throw pictures over the wall, and sometimes that doesn't work so well. So there are ways to cover more ground and clarify what you're.
Like to a degree, like one of my designers, who JB will know, Bill's a craftsman. He loves crafting, and for the most part, I tell him that that's not super important. And that the artifact can be important if that's what you're trying to convey, but like we also have a design system in place. So like to a degree, there's a source of truth that people can use for like what our system consists of. But what's more important to quality is actually consistency of behaviors, and those things aren't things that you can necessarily specify well. So it really does mean a lot of communication and alignment. It may mean building interactive prototypes, like you may need to pull out principle and to start actually like showing someone how something works. In my past, I literally use my hands a lot to talk about the speed of motion or the behaviors of things, and I don't think there's an answer that really focuses on the artifact itself. That like, unfortunately, artifacts are open to interpretation, and you're never going to be able to specify every behavior, which is why like I think more and more like we either look at very interactive tools or straight up prototyping, but really I think the most important thing is like how well aligned is your dev team to the outcome that you want to create. And I know that's maybe not a satisfactory answer if you want to think about the craft and the artifact, but as far as I've seen, that like the artifacts are a great start, and really depending on the product you're building. Like I used to work on like really high touch marketing sites, and then like Starbucks and Nike want to see what's built exactly as it was designed, and they really care about how specific that artifact is. But in the product world, it's much different. It's really more about things like performance. That's a much bigger thing that you just can't communicate in.
Yeah, I've wondered how do you communicate, like for the designers under you? Do you tell them don't talk to the marketing director or don't talk to the CEO? Like you just want to be the only source for what's happening?
No.
Yeah.
We have a pretty open culture at Clio where like anyone can ask for time with Jack and they can get it and they can talk to him.
CEO?
Jack's our CEO, that's right. I'm not protective of that in that like my job is to try to provide a consistent message in a timely manner in terms of like what is happening at a strategic level that everyone should be aware of. And I'm probably the first source to answer questions when people say, hey, why? Why are we prioritizing one thing over another? And I can help represent that to kind of manage kind of Jack's bandwidth. But you know, we have like I mentioned with our onboarding one-on-ones, like our culture is such that if you have a question, you can either post it on Speak Up and you know, it's like either anonymous or named in the company, and you can ask questions about things like, why do we have this shitty policy? Like, and we've thought about this, about whether the fact like, hey, should we get rid of anonymous postings? Is that aligned with our culture? And I think that like, as much as we would want people to practice radical candor and give feedback to each other and challenge each other, we know that for some people, they're just not going to find a safe place to express something to the CEO or another director, and we need to provide avenues that we can do that. So for the most part, if you know, people want to go talk to someone else because they don't believe what I have to say, then they're welcome to. My goal is to be transparent enough that and clear enough, and to build that trust with the team that they believe what I say. And it's rare that they'll feel the need to work around me. Right. Irina? Totally.
Let's have a big round of applause for